Shalom, shalom, peace and blessings. Now let's get straight to it. All right, so today we're going to talk about Romans chapter 2, verse 28, and the circumcision. And what is circumcision, and what did it mean in the scriptures in the quote unquote Old Testament and in the quote unquote New Testament? That's what we're going to be analyzing today, because this verse right here is used to denote what some call a spiritual Israelite, which is there's no breakdowns for that. There's no precepts for that. There's nothing of that in the scriptures, but that's what's kind of used here. That's what people try to use for this verse here. So we're going to break all of that down and talk about circumcision and what it means, like I stated. So let's go ahead. Let's read this first, and then we're going to bag it all the way back. Let's get Romans chapter 2 and verse 28.
It's the book of Romans chapter 2 and verse 28. For he is not a Jew, which is one outwardly, neither is that circumcision, which is outward in the flesh.
Okay, so actually let's get verse 29 while we're here.
Verse 29, but he is a Jew, which is one inwardly, and circumcision is that of the heart, in the spirit, and not in the letter, whose praise is not of men, but of the Most High.
So, one can kind of see where, I guess, if you take your eyes back to how they used to be before, you start actually reading the Bible, one could see where you would say, okay, maybe this is referring to something, where you're inwardly a Jew, where you accept Christ and now you're inwardly a Jew. Therefore, the promises now apply to you, and the covenants and the kingdom and the law, so on and so forth. That's not the case. So let's go all the way back. Let's see when circumcision was first implemented. The first time it was mentioned. All right, let's talk about the covenant that the Most High made with Abraham. Let's start at Genesis chapter 17 and verse 9.
Book of Genesis chapter 17 and verse 9. And the Most High said unto Abraham, thou shalt keep my covenant, therefore, thou and thy seed after thee in their generations.
Okay, so even your seed afterwards has to keep this covenant. Keep going.
Verse 10, this is my covenant, which ye shall keep between me and you and thy seed after thee. Every man child among you shall be circumcised.
Okay, every man child among you, meaning every male, shall be circumcised. All right, and we'll get the definition next. Let's get verse 11.
Verse 11, and ye shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and it shall be a token of the covenant betwixt me and you.
So let's get what circumcision is in the concordance here, which is basically just a definition of the word that's used for right here, and in many of the verses here for circumcised or circumcision. Let's see, it's Strong's H4135, mul. All right, in the modern Hebrew. So it says, to circumcise, let oneself be circumcised, cut, be cut off, to circumcise, to cut off, to cut down. So we all should be familiar with this. So the circumcision that's performed today, that is the same circumcision that is being mentioned here in Genesis, the 17th chapter. All right, this is the same thing. So it's not anything, that you aren't familiar with. But there was a few things I kind of wanted to go over that we're going to get in the scriptures here. So one thing that we need to know is that this covenant was a major covenant that the Israelites adhered to. It was a major custom. It was a big deal in ancient times. Not so much now, but in the ancient times, it was huge. But actually, yeah, we pretty much, Circumcise, therefore, the foreskin of your heart. Okay, we're gonna get into that, of course. You know what? Let's get back to the word. So again, you see that it says, "This is my covenant, which ye shall keep between me, you, and thy seed after thee." So this covenant here is pretty much a covenant that the Most High made with Abraham. That was inside of the first covenant, because sometimes the Most High made covenants that weren't the actual covenant that the Israelites made in Mount Sinai in Exodus the 24th chapter. Another example is the covenant that the Most High made with all flesh in Genesis chapter 9. And let's get that real quick, just as an example, Genesis 9 and 9.
The book of Genesis, chapter 9 and verse 9. And I, behold, I establish my covenant with you and with your seed after you.
Keep going.
And with every living creature that is with you, of the fowl, of the cattle, and of every beast of the earth with you, from all that go out of the ark to every beast of the earth.
Keep going.
Verse 11, and I will establish my covenant with you. Neither shall all flesh be cut off anymore by the waters of a flood. Neither shall any more be a flood to destroy the earth.
Keep going.
And the Most High said, this is the token of the covenant which I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for perpetual generations.
Okay, so this is the covenant that the Most High made with all flesh, all creatures on earth, that he would never flood it again. So, if we get in these last days and, Esau on the news talking about it's going to be another flood, don't believe it. This world will never be flooded again, thus saith the Lord. All right, but the point is here that I wanted to show that you had, covenants that the Most High made. So this covenant was within the quote unquote old covenant, or what we call the Old Testament. All right. So let's get back to it. Verse 12.
Bring it back up. Come on, verse 12.
Yeah.
And he that is 8 days old shall be circumcised among you, every man child in your generations. He that is born in the house or bought with money of any stranger, which is not of thy seed.
Keep going.
Verse 13. He that is born in thy house and he that is bought with thy money must needs be circumcised, and my covenant shall be in your flesh for an everlasting covenant.
For an everlasting covenant. Now you're starting to see why our people took this very seriously. Keep going.
Verse 14. And the uncircumcised man child, whose flesh of his foreskin is not circumcised, thou shalt be cut off from his people, and he hath broken my covenant.
So now we see this is one of the reasons why our people swore by circumcision, because they didn't want to be cut off from the people. This grew to be a huge custom in Israel. All right, and it was part of the law as well. Let's get that in Leviticus chapter 12 and verse. We can start at verse 1 through 3. Just start at verse 1.
The book of Leviticus chapter 12 and verse 1. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, speak unto the children of Israel, saying, if a woman have conceived seed and born a man child, then she shall be unclean 7 days. According to the days of the separation for her infirmity, shall she be unclean.
So you're supposed to do it on the 8th day. Okay, let's keep going.
Verse 3, and in the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised.
All right, so again, this is in the law. We know transgression of the law is sin. So this is one of those laws that, those that were actually diligent in the law, they made sure that they kept it. All right, and we're about to get examples of, how serious our people were about it. But one thing that I wanted to mention quickly here is that this is a shadow of things to come. Just like you have water baptism, that was a shadow of things to come. All right. even our fleshly bodies are shadows, is a shadow of things to come, to be in the celestial body that our people will have in the kingdom. All right, and this is no different. But we about to get all that. We about to get it. Let's get now let's get Genesis 34. Now we about to show, how our people viewed circumcision. Now let's we could really start from verse 1, but let's see. Let's start at Genesis chapter 34. No, wait, we'll start at verse 1. We'll skip a few verses here and there. Start at verse 1.
So it's the book of Genesis, chapter 34, and verse 1. And Dinah, the daughter of Leah, which she bare unto Jacob, went out to see the daughters of the land.
Keep going.
And when Shechem, the son of Hamor, the Hivite, prince of the country, saw her, he took her and lay with her and defiled her.
Oh man, he took her, lay with her, and defiled her. Okay. All right. Verse 3.
Verse 3. And his soul clave unto Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, and he loved the damsel and spake kindly unto the damsel.
Okay, so Shechem went off, but this is a heathen, though. Shechem is. He took the daughter of Jacob, which is Leah. Dinah. That's Leah's the mother. All right. So we see that already went down. Now let's go to verse 9.
Verse 9. And make ye marriages with us, and give your daughters unto us, and take our daughters unto you.
So he trying to make a pact here. All right. He's trying to make a pact here with the Israelites. Well, they would trade their daughters unto them, being the Hivites. All right. And let's skip down to 13.
Verse 13. And the sons of Jacob answered Shechem and Hamor, his fathers, deceitfully, and said, because he had defiled Dinah, their sister.
Okay, keep on.
And they said unto him, we cannot do this thing, to give our sister to one that is uncircumcised, for that were a reproach unto us.
Okay, so the other nations, not only were they seen as, of course, not being Israelites, so not being the sons and daughters of the Most High, they were seen as being uncircumcised. So that was a major issue as well. All right, we're about to see that all throughout the scriptures. Let's get Judges chapter 1 through 3.
It's the book of Judges, chapter 14 and verse 1. And Samson went down to Timnath and saw a woman in Timnath of the daughters of the Philistines.
Keep going.
And he came up and told his father and his mother and said, I have seen a woman in Timnath of the daughters of the Philistines. Now therefore get her for me to wife.
Samson always wanted the Philistine women. So Samson is an Israelite from the tribe of Dan. He wants a Philistine, which is a Hamite. All right, a woman of another nation to take on a wife. All right, and let's see what his parents said. Keep going.
Verse 3. Then his father and his mother said unto him, is there never a woman among the daughters of thy brethren, or among all my people, that thou goest to take a wife of the uncircumcised Philistines? And Samson said unto his father, get her for me, for she pleaseth me well.
She pleases me well, but I guess that's the reason why. Anyway, so he wanted this Philistine woman. And look what his parents said, though. He said this uncircumcised Philistine. It's kind of similar to, and when I say similar, in a certain aspect, to the energy of the quote unquote unvaccinated and the vaccinated. Again, I'm saying this from a certain standpoint because I'm not advocating that you should be vaccinated, but you see how they treated the quote unquote unvaccinated, those that were vaccinated. You had some of these mugs out here talking about what should we do with the unvaccinated, and do they deserve to still do this and that? You were seen as like filthy. And that's the same way that Israel looked at the other nations because they were uncircumcised. That's why they described, Samson's parents described the Philistine woman as the uncircumcised Philistines. All right, that's the way that they looked at it.
A lot.
All right, Khan.
I got a precept just add on there.
All right.
Can I get the book of First Samuel, chapter 17, verse 26?
I got it right here.
Read it out, please.
All right, it's the book of First Samuel, chapter 17 and verse 26. And David spake to the men that stood by him, saying, what shall be done to the man that killeth his Philistine, and taketh away the reproach from Israel? For who is the uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God?
So on notice David's calling the Goliath a reproach and on someone that is pretty much going up to this dishonor Israel. So he also calls him an uncircumcised Philistine. So like he is pairing up that being as a bad thing.
Exactly. That's pretty much what I was going to say there. And so right here I have Strong's H6189, which is the word for uncircumcised. All right, so uncircumcised, it says uncircumcised here in the outline of biblical usage. It says uncircumcised having foreskin. All right, so what I wanted to pull from this is down here in the Hebrew Chaldee lexicon. All right, it says here, uncircumcised, Genesis 17:14, Exodus 12:14, often use opprobriously of the Gentiles as the Philistines. And we see here this word opprobrious means expressing scorn or criticism. Because again, that's the way that Israel looked at the other nations, like, wow, you uncircumcised. All right, again, this was a major thing. And this is why also in the quote unquote New Testament, our people were having a hard time understanding, the switching of covenants, which we're about to go into. I'm gonna get too far ahead of myself. Let's get one last example here. Let's get First Chronicles chapter 10, and then let's go from verse 1 through 4.
Book of First Chronicles chapter 10 and verse 1. Now the Philistines fought against Israel, and the men of Israel fled before the Philistines and fell down slain in Mount Gilboa.
Mm-hmm.
And the Philistines followed hard after Saul and after his sons, and the Philistines slew Jonathan, Abinadab, and Melchishua, the sons of Saul. And the battle went sore against Saul, and the archers hit him, and he was wounded of the archers.
Okay, so Saul and his sons are being defeated by the Philistines. All right. Verse 4.
Verse 4. Then Saul to his armor bearer, draw thy sword and thrust me through therewith, lest these uncircumcised come and abuse me. But his armor bearer would not, for he was sore afraid. So Saul took a sword and fell upon it.
So Saul rather kill himself than be killed by the uncircumcised. That's how serious it was. You see what I'm saying? It says here, then Saul said to his armor bearer, draw thy sword and thrust through therewith. All right, lest these uncircumcised come and abuse me. All right, but his armor bearer, he wouldn't do it. So Saul took a sword and fell on himself because you know, his right-hand man there, the armor bearer, he didn't want to do it because he was the king. All right, but point is though, you know, that's how being uncircumcised was viewed. All right, that was a major offense. Like, oh man, you ain't circumcised? Like that was a major thing. Now, this is all examples of how we viewed circumcision in the old covenant. All right, you know, and there's more, but that's pretty much the point that I wanted to get at. All right. Now let's move on to the new covenant, because we building back up to Romans 2:28 to get, you know, get some more context on what was going on there. All right, let's get a scripture we get here often. Let's get Jeremiah 31:31.
The book of Jeremiah, chapter 31, and verse 31. And it reads, "Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah."
Okay, so this is a new covenant. This is not the same covenant that Moses gave to the children of Israel, Mount Sinai, in Exodus 24. All right, keep going.
Verse 32. "Not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, which my covenant they break, although I was an husband unto them, saith the Lord."
Okay, so we broke that first covenant, and that was the reason that we needed a second covenant. Okay, so again, this is not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt. So in the wilderness, as we had that covenant made, right? So this is a different covenant. This is a new covenant. Okay, so now let's talk about when that new covenant began. All right, let's get Matthew chapter 26 and verse 26.
Book of Matthew, chapter 26 and verse 26.
So let's get verse 19. Let's get verse 19 first.
Book of Matthew, chapter 26 and verse 19. "And the disciples did as Yahushua had appointed them, and they made ready the Passover."
They made ready the Passover. The quote unquote Last Supper is the Passover. They weren't having a random supper. Okay, Yahushua and his disciples, they weren't having a random Passover. This was according to the law. All right. So just want to get that real quick. So we can go to verse 26 now.
Verse 26. "And as they were eating, Yahushua took bread and blessed it and brake it and gave it to the disciples and said, 'Take, eat, this is my body.'"
This is my body. This is symbolic. Okay. Yahushua did not give a commandment here that at the end of church he would take, which is not even bread, the flimsy little piece of stale cardboard, I mean, whatever it is, styrofoam, and take that and eat that. Okay, that was never a thing here in the scriptures. And he was talking to the disciples. He wasn't saying that you had to do any of that. Of course, we know it applies to us, you know, in a certain aspect, but all I mean there is that it wasn't a commandment. Yahushua wasn't telling you to, you know, at the end of church, you know, take one of them little things that's probably been in the back of the church for about 2 years. But keep going.
Verse 27. "And he took the cup and gave thanks and gave it to them, saying, 'Drink ye all of it.
Keep going.
For this is my blood of the New Testament, which is shed for many for the remission of sins.'"
For the remission of sins. So when Yahushua blood was spilled, that was the beginning of the New Testament or the New Covenant. All right. So again, that's why the New Testament is named the New Testament. It's really just a new covenant, but it's really just a different time period more than a different selection of books, because there was never any instruction to label the Bible as a quote unquote Old Testament and New Testament. But anyway, the point here is though that we have the new covenant that began after Yahushua was killed, okay, for the remission of sins for our people, all right, for the Israelites. And we went over that many times. But we almost back to Romans 2:28. Let's just get this real quick and then we're gonna go back there. Let's get Hebrews chapter 7. Let's start verse 11. Let's work our way down.
It's the book of Hebrews, chapter 7 and verse 11. If therefore perfection were by the Levitical priesthood, for under it the people received the law.
For under it the people received the law. When you read the law, a lot of times it's referring to that Levitical priesthood or the first covenant. It's not referring to the entire law. Okay, it could not be, because why would Christ sit up there and tell you to dishonor your mother and your father, to covet your neighbor, to commit adultery and things of that nature? You can't have it both ways. You can't say the law is done away with, but we're going to keep these few things that we think we can do. It doesn't work like that. That's why it says, for under it the people received the law, under the Levitical priesthood. Keep going.
What further need was there that another priest should rise after the order of Melchizedek and not be called after the order of Aaron?
After the order of Aaron is just referring to Levitical priesthood. That's the covenant that was established, that Moses established. Keep going.
Verse 12. For the priesthood being changed, there is made of necessity a change also of the law.
Yeah, the change of the law. You no longer have to sacrifice animals, and you go up to the temple and have Levitical or priests that are Levites, handle the temple and things of that nature. That's the change. Not saying that you no longer have to keep the law at all. Okay, let's keep going.
Verse 13. For he of whom these things are spoken pertaineth to another tribe, of which no man gave attendance at the altar.
So let's get straight to the point. Let's get verse 16.
Verse 16. Who was made not after the law of a carnal commandment, but after the power of an endless life.
Not after the law of a carnal commandment. Okay, I think we got the word carnal. I think right here. Yeah, we got the word carnal. So when we think about carnal here, it says here, not after the law of a carnal commandment. What is a carnal commandment? All right, it's a carnal, having the nature of flesh, i.e. under the control of the animal appetites, governed by mere human nature, not by the spirit of the Most High. So what is a carnal commandment? Having your foreskin taken off your genitals, if you're a man child, that's a carnal commandment. All right. It was required of the law, but it's still a fleshly commandment. You understand? Now we're about to talk about that a little bit more though. Let's get Romans chapter 2 and 20. So let's go back up. Let's get verse 25 first.
The book of Romans chapter 2 and verse 25. And it reads, for circumcision verily profited, if thou keep the law, but if thou be a breaker of the law, thy circumcision is made uncircumcision.
So think about it. All right. So you're circumcised, right? You get circumcised on the 8th day, but then you become a murderer. It doesn't even have to be anything, that far off, because remember, we read in the scriptures that if you hate your brother, you're also a murderer. All right, so you can be a murderer that way, or whatever offense of the law that it is. What good is it that you were circumcised if you going off anyway? Okay, your circumcision at that time is made uncircumcision. That's what it's saying here. Okay, let's get James chapter 2 and verse 8.
It's the book of James, chapter 2 and verse 8. If ye fulfill the royal law according to the scripture, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself, ye do well.
I see some brothers talk about the royal law like it was a different set of laws. The royal law is thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. And you look at the word royal here, it just means like chief. So the base of the law is, or belong to a king, principal or chief. So it's a principal law. All the law falls on loving your neighbor as you love thyself, because if you love your neighbor as you love thyself, then you will keep the law to the best of your abilities at all times. So all the law falls on that. That's all that means. But brothers breaking this out like this was like a set of laws that was new or something. This is Leviticus chapter 19 and verse 17 through 18. But anyway, I actually meant to start at 9, but it's all good. Let's get verse 9.
Verse 9. But if ye have respect to persons, ye commit sin and are convinced of the law as transgressors.
All right. If you have respect to persons, we talked about that before. Not supposed to be a respecter of persons. All right. You're not supposed to look at Will Smith, in higher regards as other people. Okay. Let's keep going.
Verse 10. For whosoever shall keep the whole law and yet offend in one point, he is guilty of all.
Okay. So let me be very clear and say this. This is not saying that you just give up. You're not supposed to keep the law at all, because if you break one part of it, you're guilty of all. This is not what this is saying. I'll pull this real quick, just in case, a classic. Let's get Sirach 15 and 20.
It's the book of Sirach, chapter 15 and verse 20. And it reads, he hath commanded no man to do wickedly, neither hath he given any man license to sin.
You're not commanded to do wickedly. This is not what James is bringing out to you. You don't have the license to sin. You understand? What this is referring to is what we read here in Romans chapter 2 and verse 25. All right. If you keep the law, but if you circumcise and you break the law, what did that even profit you to be circumcised in the first place? Because yes, if you break the law, you break the entire law. You understand? But again, at the same time, you have to think about it like this. Will you ever be perfect in the flesh at all, in anything? No, you won't. But does that mean that you just sit at home and be a bum and do nothing at all with your life? All right, so, don't get it twisted. Don't take it too far, because that's what they do in the quote unquote church system. All right, they read verses like this and say, oh, you see, James is telling us not to keep the law, because you keep the whole law, you offend one point, you're guilty of all. Okay. Keep it pushing though. All right, let's get verse 26.
Book of Romans, chapter 2 and verse 26. Therefore, if the uncircumcision keep the righteousness of the law, shall not his uncircumcision be counted for circumcision?
So if you uncircumcised and you do keep the law, just the fact that you weren't circumcised, is that not counted as being circumcised? Because again, this is just something of the flesh. You understand? Now, again, of course, it was part of the old covenant. It was commanded. But we saw that when Yahushua came, you had a change of the carnal commandment, that being one of them. But really, the point is not even to not get circumcised. The point here is that if you are circumcised or you aren't circumcised, you still have to keep the law. And it doesn't make you any better that you are circumcised if you're not uncircumcised, because if you're circumcised and you go off, it's the same thing as if you're uncircumcised and you go off. What's really the difference? If you kept that one part of the law, but you offended something else, you still failed all of it. Let's keep going.
Verse 27. And shall not uncircumcision, which is by nature, if it fulfill the law, judge thee, who by the letter and circumcision does transgress the law.
All right. So, and that's pretty much what I just talked about. All right. Because really, and another point here is that this is referring to our people. I failed to mention that up until now, but because we were just talking about other things, but this is talking about our people. Paul here is not talking about the other nations and them being uncircumcised. All right. The next lesson that I do is going to go all the way into that, because we're going to talk about Galatians 3 and 28, where it talks about Jew nor Greek. All right, so Paul is talking about our people here that were going off in a far journey that were uncircumcised. But those that were circumcised didn't want to let them in because, like we saw, they looked at them as being, just out of the covenant because they weren't circumcised. So that's why he's pleading about circumcision and uncircumcision, not because he's pleading for the other nations. He's talking about our people. Okay, and we have to prove all of that. I'm not just saying that we're going to prove all of that. Let's get the next verse.
Verse 28. For he is not a Jew, which is one outwardly, neither is that circumcision, which is outward in the flesh.
All right, let's go through this slowly. It says, for he is not a Jew, which is one outwardly, meaning if you are circumcised, that doesn't mean that you are a righteous man or woman just because you are circumcised. Your outward appearance, all right, which is really the old man, because that's of the flesh. It's just like anything else with clothes or anything else. If you have the fancy and so on and so forth, that doesn't make you a righteous man or woman. Likewise, either. Let's bring that out because you can relish in being, I don't want to use the word poor, but you can relish in not having things as well and think that makes you righteous, but it doesn't either. All right, much is said about, having material things and that someone relishing in that, making them think that makes them think they're righteous, but the same can be said for the opposite. People purposely don't do things or don't have things because they think that makes them more righteous, but it doesn't either. It works both ways. But it says neither is that circumcision which is outward in the flesh. Okay, let's get 29.
Verse 29. But he is a Jew, which is one inward, and circumcision is that of the heart, in the spirit, and not in the letter, whose praise is not of men, but of the Most High.
Why does it say that? Because this is the same concept of what we read about, and we got this pulled up, Ephesians chapter 4 and 22 on down, what Yahushua brought out in John chapter 3. Let's just get it. Instead of talking about, let's just get it. Let's get Deuteronomy chapter 10 and 16 first.
It's the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 10 and verse 16. Circumcise therefore the foreskin of your heart and be no more stiff-necked.
Okay, let's get Matthew chapter 9 and 4 before we talk about Deuteronomy chapter 10.
The book of Matthew, chapter 9 and verse 4. And Yahushua, knowing their thoughts, said, wherefore think you evil in your hearts, ye evil in your hearts.
So how can you think in your heart? Because your heart is your mind. In the scriptures, many times you'll see the heart being used as your mind. That's why Yahushua said, knowing their thoughts, your thoughts are in your mind. You understand? So wherefore think ye evil in your hearts. That's why your heart is able to think, because it's likened to your mind. Now let's read Deuteronomy 10 and 16 again.
The book of Deuteronomy, chapter 10 and verse 16. Circumcise therefore the foreskin of your heart and be no more stiff-necked.
This is what Paul is bringing out. All right, if your heart, meaning your mind, your spirit is not circumcised, meaning that you've cut off the world, you've cut off you know, the things that had you in sin and bondage spiritually, if that's not cut off, then you're not really circumcised. That's the real circumcision, because that's what's going to cause you not to go off more in the future. It has to be in the inward man. So that makes you a Jew inwardly. All right, it's spiritually, because physically that doesn't mean much. All right, because you know, a lot of us are, not to go too far this way or nothing, but you know, a lot of us as a people, our males, we were circumcised physically, maybe not on the 8th day as commanded, but we were circumcised physically, but we were still going off. So what good did that profit us? Now, how did being circumcised in the flesh profit us? That's what Paul is bringing out. All right. Let's get Titus chapter 1 and verse 10.
The book of Titus, chapter 1 and verse 10. For there are many unruly and vain talkers and deceivers, especially they of the circumcision.
Oh, especially they of the circumcision. Wow. So those some of the main ones going off: unruly, vain talkers, and deceivers. Now, on another level, though, this is referring to the southern kingdom, day of the circumcision. So it's not speaking in general here, and we're gonna go back over that, but still, those are circumcised, some of the main ones, man. Let's get Jeremiah chapter 4 and verse 4.
It's the book of Jeremiah, chapter 4 and verse 4. Circumcise yourselves to the Lord and take away the foreskin of your heart, ye men of Judah and inhabitants of Jerusalem, lest my fury come forth like fire and burn that none can quench it, because of the evil of your doings.
Take away the foreskins of your heart. You got to get right spiritually from the inside. Okay, how do you do that? Through prayer and through fasting and from keeping the commandments and from faith in Yahweh. That's the only way that you're going to be able to cut off and take away the foreskins of your heart from the inward man. Everything has to be spiritual. And if you indulge in things physically, if you put your hope in things physically, then your spirit is not going to be able to grow. All right. You're not going to be able to take away the foreskins of your heart, meaning your mind. All right. Let's get 1 Corinthians chapter 7 and verse 19.
The book of 1 Corinthians chapter 7 and verse 19. Circumcision is nothing, and uncircumcision is nothing, but the keeping of the commandments of the Most High.
Man, bring that out one more time.
1 Corinthians chapter 7 and verse 19. Circumcision is nothing, and uncircumcision is nothing.
Both of them is nothing. Keep going.
But the keeping of the commandments of the Most High.
But the keeping of the commandments of the Most High. I thought Paul told us to do away with the law. Why is he telling us to keep the commandments of the Most High? All right. Because that's where it's at. All right. And again, when it came with the Pharisees and a lot of our people, we ended up putting more importance on things that the Most High never said was prioritized, like circumcision. All right, we looked at that as that was just a holy grail. Like, you weren't circumcised, you can't even talk to me, dog. You get up out my face. You uncircumcised, you're filthy. All right, you're likened to another nation when you're uncircumcised. That's what we read about in Acts the 15th chapter. We start at verse 1, when the Pharisees said, men came in and said that if you're not circumcised, you cannot be saved. That's why they said that. All right, it's putting a lot of importance on being physically circumcised. But circumcision is nothing, and uncircumcision is nothing, but the keeping of the commandments of the Most High. That's what you got to do. Let's get Ephesians chapter 22. Ephesians chapter 4 in verse 22.
The book of Ephesians chapter 4 in verse 22. That ye put off concerning the former conversation the old man, which is corrupt according to the deceitful lusts.
which is, circumcising your heart. Keep going.
Verse 23, and be renewed in the spirit of your mind.
Be renewed in the spirit of your mind, like the brother brought out in the lesson daily. You understand? Renewed in the spirit of your mind daily. All right, and that's another thing with being circumcised. That's something that you can only do once. Right? Once it's gone, it's gone. You can only be physically circumcised once, but you can constantly try to take off that foreskin of your heart. You understand? You constantly can build up your spirit. You can't constantly do that with your flesh. All right, once it's taken off, it's gone. Let's keep going.
Verse 24, and that ye put on the new man, which after the Most High is created in righteousness and true holiness.
True holiness, not just what you boast about, not what you act like you doing, but true holiness. All right, true righteousness. That's when you put on the new man. That's what it means to be reborn. All right, it's not being dipped in water and acting like you're doing something. It's actually living your daily life with your heart consecrated to the Most High. That's your real foundation. You're not putting on an act. So when people are not around, you doing messed up stuff. All right. You're not acting like Will Smith and Chris Rock. Let's get John chapter 3 and verse 3.
It's the book of John, chapter 3 and verse 3. Yahushua answered and said unto him, verily, verily, I say unto thee, except a man be born again, he cannot see the kingdom of the Most High.
You have to be born again. That's what it means to be born again. It's to put off that old man. You understand? To be circumcised in the heart. Let's get verse 4. Verse 4.
Verse 4. Nicodemus saith unto him, how can a man be born when he is old? Can he enter the second time into his mother's womb and be born?
And Nicodemus didn't know what was going on, man. All right, let's get verse 6 real quick.
Verse 6. That which is born of the flesh is flesh, and that which is born of the spirit is spirit.
Okay, you got to be spiritual. All right, that's the only way, because we're fighting a spiritual war out here. This is a spiritual battle. None of this stuff in the flesh is going to mean anything. Okay, it's not going to mean anything when it's all over. None of it. All right, again, going both ways. Whether you have a lot, whether you have little, none of that is going to matter. Okay. Let's get 2 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 17.
It's the book of 2 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 17. Therefore, if any man be in Hamashiach, he is a new creature. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new.
Old things are passed away. You know, when you really become spiritual, it's not like the things that you don't need to be doing according to the law. It's not really a temptation to do a lot of things. I'm not saying that means you're going to be perfect, but when it comes to keeping the Most High's laws, at least to the best of your ability or what you know best to do, it doesn't become like, man, I wish I can do that, but I just can't. You don't walk by, pork, bacon, and be like, man, if only I could get that. Man, just maybe this one time. You don't even think about it. Or whatever else it is. The heavier matters of the law, adultery, and so on and so forth. You don't even think about doing it because that's your spirit. Your spirit is going to override the flesh 10 times out of 10, 1,000 times out of 1,000 if it's strong enough. But your flesh, if your flesh is stronger, then hey, your flesh is going to override. Flesh is going to win. That's why it's important to have the spirit built up. The spirit lasts forever. Even when your physical body dies, your spirit goes up back to the Most High. So only the Most High can destroy your spirit, but his flesh, it don't take nothing. All right. And we actually, let's let's kind of close out with this here. Let's get Romans chapter 4 and verse 1.
The book of Romans, chapter 4 and verse 1. What shall we say then that Abraham, our father, as pertaining to the flesh, have found?
It says our father. Abraham was our father. All right. And Paul referenced to Abraham a lot because it's evident that the Israelites that he was talking to, like in this chapter in Rome, they looked up to Abraham, just like a lot of brothers today look up to certain basketball players and athletes or whatever the case. They looked up to Abraham. So that was an example that they were able to, understand when he used Abraham. But the narrative is that Romans are all so-called white, but why would it say Abraham, our father? All right, he's talking to Israelites. But let's keep on.
Verse 2, for if Abraham were justified by works, he hath whereof to glory, but not before the Most High.
All right, we're about to see how was Abraham justified. Let's keep going.
Verse 3, for what saith the scripture? Abraham believed the Most High, and was counted unto him for righteousness.
Keep going.
Not to him that worketh is the reward not reckoned of grace, but of debt.
Okay, so if you put all of your belief in the work that you do in keeping the law, then you basically, it's almost like you're working off a debt. All right, you constantly feel like you got to be working, and you do, but you don't do it from the standpoint of, well, this is going to be what saves me. Only the Most High can save you. All right, Romans chapter 9, the Most High tell you, I have mercy on who I want to have mercy on. He do whatever he want. So you can live whatever life you want to live and think you keeping the law, and you still can be destroyed. None of us has a ticket to the kingdom. I don't care who you are, what you claim to know, or what you do on a day-to-day basis. We don't have a ticket to the kingdom. Okay, so our works is not what's going to be what saves us. It's only the Most High and his Son. Let's keep going.
Verse 5, but to him that worketh not, but believeth on him that justifieth the ungodly, his faith is counted for righteousness.
Now, that's all we talked about. Well, I sent this to you, brothers. I believe it was yesterday or the other day, when we talked about the Pharisees and the sinners. Why Yahushua reacted, with the Pharisees, like he was always cutting them boys up. But when it came to those that were in sin, he had patience with them, because a lot of those, they were sinners or ungodly at the time, but they actually wanted to get right. So, you can be doing the works, but if you don't have the faith, it doesn't really mean much. Let's keep going.
Verse 6, even as David also describeth the blessedness of the man unto whom the Most High imputeth righteousness without works.
Keep going.
Saying, blessed are they whose iniquities are forgiven and whose sins are covered.
So, we got to hope our sins are covered, because, I can only speak for myself, but I know I deserve to be put to death. Whether that be for right now or how I lived before, either way, the wages of sin is death. So that's what I deserve. So you better hope your sins are covered. That's another thing. That's why you have to have faith as well, because you stop putting the emphasis on what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. Even though you have to do that, you don't put your stock into that. It's only the Most High that can save you. All right. Let's skip down to verse 9.
Verse 9, cometh this blessedness then upon the circumcision only, or upon the uncircumcision also? For we say that faith was reckoned to Abraham for righteousness.
Okay, let's keep going.
Verse 10, how was it then reckoned? When he was in circumcision or in uncircumcision? Not in circumcision, but in uncircumcision.
And Paul, man, the way he knew the scriptures is just amazing to me. because I could have lived 1,000 years and I never would have even noticed this here in Genesis. Let's get this, what he's referring to. So he said that the Most High, or really just says here, Abraham was reckoned for his righteousness when he wasn't circumcised. So let's get the example here in Genesis chapter 15. And then let's start at verse 5.
The book of Genesis chapter 15 and verse 5. And he brought him forth abroad and said, look now toward heaven and tell the stars if thou be able to number them. And he said unto him, so shall thy seed be.
So even though Abraham was the father of other nations, this is referring to the children of Israel, because that's where the promise it went down to. It only went to the children of Israel. All right, and we get that many times. So he's referring to Israel being like the stars of the heavens. All right, but let's get verse 6.
Verse 6. And he believed in the Lord, and he counted it to him for righteousness.
Oh, so he believed in the Most High, and he counted to him for righteousness. But you see, this is Genesis chapter 15. Remember, the Most High didn't give the covenant to be circumcised until Genesis chapter 17. So this took place before Abraham was even circumcised. Okay, because as you see down here later on in the chapter, he went through and circumcised Isaac, and he went through and circumcised Ishmael as well. All right, but that was before, and him in itself too. So real quick, just get 23 real quick, just so we can bring it out.
It's the book of Genesis, chapter 17 and verse 23. And Abraham took Ishmael, his son, and all that were born in his house, and all that were bought with his money, every male among the men of Abraham's house, and circumcised the flesh of their foreskin in the self same day, as the Most High had said unto him.
In verse 26.
Verse 26. In the self same day was Abraham circumcised, and Ishmael his son.
Okay, but again, this was after, as in when he got circumcised, this was after this event here. And read verse 6 one more time.
Book of Genesis, chapter 15, verse 6. And he believed in the Most High, and he counted it to him for righteousness.
He counted to him for righteousness before he was circumcised. So in the quote unquote Old Testament, there's many clues to what was to come as far as being circumcised and different things of that nature. But our people, you know, we didn't know about it until we had brothers like Paul bring it out in the apostles and things of that nature. But the point here is, though, that the Most High, you know, counted this for righteousness before he was even circumcised. This doesn't mean to not be circumcised, but as you see, that wasn't what the Most High put his full stock in, because the covenant had not even been given to Abraham yet. So you can think of this as other ways as well. It's not just about being circumcised. If you wear fringes, you can't look at your fringes and say, well, you know, you may not even look at it and say, okay, I know I'm going to be in the kingdom because I wear fringes. It may not go that deep, but you still may look at it at a certain sense of pride. It really shouldn't be like that. It's all praises go to the Most High. He get all the glory. So when you're wearing fringes or you doing anything keeping the law, that's the way that you have to view it. And you could easily get caught up, just like our people were, thinking that the works that you do is going to equal being a kingdom, or again, not that deep. Just you put a certain sense of pride into it. All right, because you know you're trying to outrighteous folks. Like I said the other day, brothers out here trying to outrighteous other brothers. Well, I do this and you don't do this. Well, look, we all can be destroyed. All right, we all might not make it. Or the brother or sister that's not even in the knowledge of the truth right now. They're not even keeping the commandments right now. they can make it. All right. We know about the parable where at the last moment, those came into the truth and they made it just like those that had been in the truth. So, you just can't have a sense of pride about these things. That's what Paul was bringing out, and that's what this really means in Romans chapter 2 and verse 28. But this has nothing to do with another nation of people. That's why he didn't mention another nation of people. This is just referring to your heart being circumcised, all right, getting your spirit right, the inward man, all right, which is the new man, being born again. It's just a different way of saying the same thing, all right? Different prophets, apostles, they brought it out a different way, but it's the same concept. All right, brothers, got any precepts or anything? Well, I believe I got one more.
I got one.
All right, what you got, Doc?
It's just Sirach 44:19 through 22. Just going into Abraham being faithful and how his blessing went to Isaac and Jacob, to the children of Israel. I'll read it. You can break it down, or I can just read it through. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's the book of Sirach, chapter 44 and verse 19. Abraham was a great father of many people. In glory was there none like unto him.
Keep going.
Who kept the law of the Most High and was in covenant with him. He established the covenant in his flesh, and when he was proved, he was found faithful.
All right, he was found faithful. Okay, the covenant was him. Keep going.
Verse 21, therefore he assured him by an oath that he would bless the nations in his seed, and that he would multiply him as the dust of the earth, and exalt his seed as the stars, and cause them to inherit from sea to sea, and from the river unto the uttermost parts of the land. With Isaac did he establish likewise for Abraham his father's sake the blessing of all men and the covenant. And made it rest upon the head of Jacob. He acknowledged him in his blessing and gave him inheritance, and divided his portions among the 12 tribes did he part them.
That's the part I was waiting to get to, because you could read this, Abraham was a father of many people, and say, oh, you see, Abraham was father of many people, of many Gentiles. No, the promise came down and was divided between the 12 tribes. And that's another thing that brothers had a lot of pride in, and what tribe they were from. It's probably why that we have pride in what neighborhood we're from today. Just different things like that, or being quote unquote light skin, brown skin, and dark skin, things of that nature. Different divisions within ourselves that doesn't mean anything at all. And we have different subcultures within ourselves. I'm Jamaican and I'm from the Caribbeans, and all that doesn't matter. Okay. Your culture is Israelite culture. All right. No matter whether you're from the States, from the islands, or you in Britain, that's your culture, is the scriptures. All right.
A lot.
I
got one more just ended up. Let me get 2 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 22.
It's the book of 2 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 22. Are they Hebrews? So am I. Are they Israelites? So am I. Are they the seed of Abraham? So am I.
Hey, it's plain. There it is.
In the next lesson, I'm gonna go into talking about strangers, foreigners, uncircumcised, and things of that nature as well. We gonna definitely get it. I had this pulled up. We run a little over, but I just get this real quick since it's already here. Colossians chapter 2 and verse 11.
This is the book of Colossians chapter 2 and verse 11. In whom also ye are circumcised, with the circumcision made with hands, in putting off the body of the sins of the flesh by the circumcision of Hamashiach.
All right. So you put your faith into the Messiah. That's the circumcision that's made without hands, the circumcision of your heart. All right. Which means your spirit, building your spirit up. Again, you know, put down these carnal commandments of men, because it's not going to get you anywhere. All right. With that, shalom.